Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the delegation of the Ismaili Imamate. This is the home of Aga Khan Foundation Canada and our offices and our venue host for this evening's event, Canadian Global Citizenship in Action, celebrating International Development Week 2024. International Development Week spotlights Canadians' contributions to eradicating poverty and building a more peaceful, inclusive, and prosperous world. It is a unique opportunity to inform, inspire, involve, and celebrate Canadians' global impact on international development. This is something that we strive to do every day here at Aga Khan Foundation Canada, and it is our pleasure to be able to welcome so many to join us in this spirit. As part of our welcome, we want to acknowledge the territory on which we gather to do so, and pay respects to the Algonquin and Anishinaabe Nation, whose unceded ancestral lands we gather on today. We are grateful for the stewardship and courage of elders and traditional knowledge keepers, past, present, and future. We make this acknowledgement to reaffirm our commitment to strengthening relationships, improving our own understanding of First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, and cultures across Canada, Turtle Island, critically examining our privilege and moving forward in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. We recognize that since time immemorial, the Algonquin peoples have been coming together at this place where the three rivers meet in a spirit of exchange of goods and services, but also of relations and ideas. And so we seek to continue that centuries-old tradition of sharing and exchanging ideas and building relationships. So today, as we come together to celebrate Canadian global citizenship, we would be remiss not to recognize a very significant milestone the Aga Khan Foundation Canada is marking in 2024, the 40th anniversary of the World Partnership Walk. This milestone is not just a number, it's a call for reflection, celebration, and a renewed commitment to creating positive change in the world. It's a collective step forward to address the challenges that lie ahead. The story of the walk began in 1985 when a group of women in Vancouver, all hailing from Africa or Asia, united to raise funds for Aga Khan Foundation Canada. Their shared goal was to give back to the communities they had left behind, and their efforts resulted in persuading 1,000 other Canadians to join them in a walk to fight global poverty, raising an impressive $55,000. Which is more than $135,000 in today's dollars, for those of you who 40 years ago was just a blip as well. That inaugural walk evolved into an annual event with the support of tens of thousands of volunteers, corporate sponsors, and participants nationwide, all united by the belief that we can create a better world together. Fast forward 4 decades, and the World Partnership Walk has raised over $140 million and stands as the largest event in Canada to support international development. The funds raised by the walk have played a crucial role in unlocking the potential of millions of people in Africa and Asia, empowering them to lead lasting change in their own communities. However, it goes just beyond the financial contributions. Every Canadian who has stepped forward through the walk has sparked dialogue in their homes, workplaces, or communities about Canada's role in global development and contributed to a collective understanding that we can indeed create a better world together. As we commemorate this remarkable journey, we cannot overlook the impact that our volunteers, donors, and fundraisers have made over the past 4 decades, which stands as a shining example of what Canadian global citizenship can achieve. And so, to those of you joining us in person or online, we say congratulations and thank you. Our collective efforts have not only changed lives, but have also initiated vital conversations about Canada's role in shaping a more equitable and just world. Because when Canadians come together, we can act locally and have a meaningful impact globally. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kirsten, for giving us those remarks and also taking us down memory lane for the past 40 plus years, or around 40 years, I should say, of the World Partnership Walk being in existence. So before we head into the panel discussion this evening and continue for the remaining part of today's session, we would love to take a very quick activity break with all of you, and I invite you to get involved. So if you have a personal device on you or a device that you can use to scan a QR code, please, I encourage you to bring out that device and scan the QR code. And also, if you are joining us online, please do so as well, or use the link that is being provided within the chat. If you can't scan the QR code, you can easily just go to slido.com and then put in the passcode that is shown on the screen, which is AKFC IDW. So I'm just going to give a few minutes to allow a few of us to get into Slido, both those who are in person and those who are joining us virtually as well. Okay, so I think we can go on into the poll questions. So the first question that we have here says, if you could describe your ideal vision for a more peaceful, equitable, and pluralistic world in 3 emojis, what would you use? So please be as creative as you can be. I know we are a bit restricted, but if you were able to describe your vision for where you see us heading, please go ahead and share. I'd love to see the responses that will be coming through momentarily. I see a lot of smiley faces. Some people also typing in their text as well. Respectful, joyful, a lot of applause. I see some peace signs. I see a dove, books, heart signs, people hugging each other. I see water. I see some symbols of balance, some symbols of the earth, some symbols representing our institutions, hospitals, and a lot more coming in. So thank you. And then just quickly moving on to the next question that we have before we transition into the next segment. We'd love to hear from you. I know part of today's session, we're going to be talking about, this idea of making a difference and what that has mean and continues to mean for us as people in Canada. So for you as an individual, what does making a difference mean to you? If you could put that in one word. So I see some responses already coming in as well. Dignity being one of the most emphasized ones. Action, involvement. I see change. I see inclusion. I see togetherness. I see opening doors. I see community. I see empowerment, tolerance, integrity, advocacy, fairness, and I think the list continues to go on. And our hope is that even from today's conversation, and also as we continue to go about our personal and professional lives, that these are attributes that we can bring to us as we show up in spaces, as we show up at our workplace, as we show up with the work that we do, and then also more importantly, as we interact with people, both those that we know and those that we don't know. So thank you so much for participating and engaging in our little activity. And I'll just quickly pass it back to Kirsten, who will be introducing the panel for this evening. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Uju. Could I ask our panelists to join me on stage? Thank you. So with me in person and one individual with us virtually are some incredible humans who work in international development and are here to share their stories and their take on some of the incredible things we're doing, Canada's role in those things. So I would invite you, if you don't mind, to introduce yourselves. Why don't we start with our virtual panelist, Bibinur. Do you mind starting us off, and then we'll work towards me on the stage?
Sure, sure. Hope you guys can hear me.
Absolutely.
Yes, great. My name is Bibinur, as was introduced earlier. And greetings from another part of the world and from another day. It's 6th of February already here. And I work for Accelerate Prosperity initiative of Aga Khan Development Network. And I have been working in this organization since 2019 and have been, since the time I have joined, I have been working with AKFC fellows. And I think I cannot even have enough words to describe the amazing experience I had with those incredible young professionals who have contributed so much into the development. And today I'm very honored to be chosen among other supervisors also to represent our experience and to represent overall the mission. And yeah, glad to be here.
Thank you, Bibinur. Can you tell everyone where you're joining us from? I'm not sure we caught that at the beginning.
Yes, I think I didn't cover it. So I'm joining from Kyrgyzstan, country in Central Asia. Yeah.
Thank you.
So my name is Shannon Tom. It's lovely to be here this evening. I come from a public health background, and I apologize in advance for a couple of wordy titles to come. I work in the cancer system as a system performance specialist. I'm also a facilitator for a youth-led project called Yet4H, or Young Experts Tech for Health, which is a group that aims to increase youth engagement in global digital health policy. But really, I'm here today in my capacity with Care Canada as a youth public engagement champion. So I work with a group of young adults across Canada, raising awareness among Canadians around sexual and reproductive health and rights work that CARE is doing, specifically as part of our She Soars project in Kenya, Uganda, and Zambia. We do have a podcast, so check out the She Soars podcast if that's of interest, but thank you again for having me here.
Thanks, Shannon.
And hi everyone, my name is Sophie Saint-Laurent and I work as a public engagement manager at WUSC, or World University Service of Canada, for those who know the long version of her name that we're no longer using. So please call us WUSC from now on. But yeah, I'm here because I work really on engaging youth, adults, different generations around the Sustainable Development Goals, around the role that Canadians can play in supporting global development. And so I started working in this area over 10 years ago, specifically with youth, and then just realized that was absolutely not my career goal, but realized that I really enjoy seeing the evolution of people who are involved in the sector, from learning about a global issue and then making their way towards becoming engaged and active in this sector. So that's what I'm here to talk about today.
Thank you both. That's fantastic. As it is International Development Week and we are hoping to inspire, I'm going to ask Shannon and Sophie to speak to their experiences in the profession. Shannon, maybe we'll start with you. Could you share one personal or professional experience that shaped your commitment to global development?
Yeah, absolutely. So interesting, I think, contextually for me is that when I was studying public health, was right around the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. So the backdrop to my public health studies, which were largely focused on public health in Canada, was this global health emergency. And I think that is an understanding that I brought into all of my public health work to follow. I entered into the HIV sector after I graduated with my MPH. And I also completed concurrently a fellowship with Results Canada, looking at HIV as a global health issue, and that compounded that dual lens, I think, even further for me in terms of looking at what an issue like HIV looks like in Ontario, where we don't really talk about it very much, versus in the global space, HIV is such a major issue and topic that we discuss all the time. And even though they're very different from one space to another, what I really noticed working on both at the same time was that there were commonalities that you might not expect. And I think those ties from local to global have just been something that I've really tried to center in all my work since then.
That's incredible. Thanks, Shannon. So Sophie, your personal reflection?
I think for me, what I really appreciated and what got me to stay in the sector was an internship that I did in my natal region, where I'm from Eastern Quebec, so very close to the Atlantic Ocean, and we rarely get a chance to engage in international opportunities. Nothing's happening. Like people don't even know that we have Wi-Fi or high-speed internet. And so getting in my hometown the chance to lead on a project that would connect the youth to what's going on in the world and have a chance to report back for Canada's 150th anniversary in 2017 was just what motivated me. And I was living in Ottawa, and when I said that they were recruiting a coordinator for my region, I'm like, I am going back home, Mom. And so I moved back with my mom for the duration of the project, and was able to recruit 12 young students from the high school and the college back in my hometown who had absolutely no idea what they were getting into, but they ended up going to an international conference, drafting recommendations on natural resources, environment, climate change, social inclusion, economic development, and youth policy that was ended back to the federal government. And just seeing the progress of these 12 young leaders, and seeing how the participation into this event has shifted their vision of how they can get involved and shifted their career plans. One of them was going into engineering, and he ended up, I think he's halfway across the world now, working for a nonprofit. And so just seeing how being exposed to a project when, especially in cases where you don't necessarily have access to this exposure, how it impacts people is really what's been driving me.
That's incredible. There's so many things I want to pull from that. First, how wonderful. I'm sure your mom was delighted to have you home. So a career in international development might take you home briefly, hopefully to the delight of your parents. That meeting people where they're at is so key to what we're trying to do, that bringing people to us is much of a harder slog, and the ability to bring the knowledge to a local community, even in the Canadian context, is changing lives, right, and changing the scope of the work. So I appreciate that immensely. Thank you. Bibinur, you work for Accelerate Prosperity, which helps grow early stage businesses and startups and innovative ideas for development for particularly young people. Can you tell us what shaped your commitment to working in the entrepreneurship space?
Yes, I think one very interesting thing about overall my career and maybe my journey is like entrepreneurship has always been part of me. It's kind of like that it's something that is in my DNA since my parents were involved in the entrepreneurship space very early when the Soviet Union actually collapsed. And I think that was like a totally new thing for our country. And they started being like first entrepreneurs in the country, maybe in the city. And then I started working for one of the microfinance institutions of AKDN, and that was start of my career in a loan department, and which basically is something where you provide a support to the small and growing businesses. That's where I started. And I think by the time that I was learning a lot about entrepreneurship, the main important thing that I have found out around entrepreneurship is that the entrepreneurs are the people who provide the solutions. And considering the challenging context of our country, how we are still in the process of developing country and developing economy, entrepreneurs are the ones who bring the innovation, who provide the solutions, who do not wait for the actions to come to them. They take the action I really found out like that all of those things resonate with who I am and who I want to be and my mission and my, let's say, passion in my life. And actually, I'm an entrepreneur myself as well. And I think I started from like a very basic like retail seller and then shifted to establishing educational institution. And the reason for that is that I wasn't able to find the proper institution for my kids when I have 3 kids, and for my first child, we were not able to find the proper institution. And I decided to come with the solution to my community. And I think after some time, I realized that I have much more to give to the entrepreneurs. If per se, I can support another maybe from 20 to 30 entrepreneurs and they can make an impact, they can employ at least 2 people that will end up having like to 40, 50 people at least. I'm not considering the customers and like other people in this, ecosystem. So I think entrepreneurship, especially in our context, is something that drives all of the innovation and drives our commitment to make our place a better place to live.
Thank you so much, Bibinur. I think that really speaks to the concept of multipliers and how we often talk about changing one person's life and the impact that can have on an entire community. Shannon, I think, actually I should say Sophie, I think it's interesting the way that Bibinur is talking about entrepreneurship impacting communities, and not everyone automatically thinks of that as part of international development work. They also, watch this segue, don't often think about art as a way to engage in international development work. Did you want to speak to that for us?
Of course I can. And so just to put a little bit of context around your question, WUSC is putting together an international art exhibition that will be launched this Friday in Ottawa at the Shaw Centre. Had to plug it. If you're free, tickets are free. Just register on the internationalforum.ca website. But the idea behind this this art exhibition is that we often try to reach different audiences through the same ways. And so, for example, panels are an easy go-to solution for non-for-profit. But who attends panel? It's usually the same people. People who are already aware or people who have already an interest in global development or in being engaged, and they just want to deepen their understanding of the sector and how they can get involved. And so when the idea actually came from a project that I did in 2012, launching a music compilation for the Quebec version of IDW, which is Journée Québécoise de la Solidarité Internationale. And we put together, because of course Quebec wants to have their own IDW, and so we put together a music compilation and reached out to different artists and were able to just get the rights to get this the CD back in the days. It's not on Spotify. And to just give it out to people so that people can listen to music that conveys a message of engagement, of how people can get involved. And so when we were reflecting on at WUSC on how can we do things differently, we thought of art. Art is a sector that is accessible to everyone, but also, like, even if you have talent, we're not talking talent or no talent, but people know about art. They can paint, some people can sing. There are so many mediums, shapes, forms that you can use to communicate through art. And when you do so, people who see the art don't necessarily perceive it the same way that you wanted to project it. And so that's where the idea came to build an art exhibition or to engage Canadians. It became a little bit bigger than what we had anticipated, but we're happy with it. But the idea of reaching out to people differently, engaging community partners, engaging artists who are looking to create social change through the art that they create. And so we ended up engaging artists from Malawi, from Ghana, and from all across Canada to build an art exhibition that's related to the Sustainable Development Goals. And so we're just inviting all of the artists to come to Ottawa, share, and build some video capsules as well that will be recorded while they'll be here, so that we can share with the public pre-recorded paint nights or art class nights that will be available for free on the WUSC website. And so just trying to get a way to reach out to a new audience. And from what I've seen so far, from the number of attendees that we're expecting on Friday for the launch, it's pretty successful. And it's people that we don't know. It's not like we usually at events you see the same names, or you can know people. I don't know anyone except the people from other organizations, obviously, who are coming and taking a sneak peek at the exhibition. But it's people who saw an opportunity. We even have an 11-year-old girl from Ottawa who submitted an art piece and was selected when the call for proposal was launched last fall. She's not connected at all with WUSC. Her mom saw it and she said, "Oh, Lena, you should apply for that." And she submitted the art piece and was selected. And so we're really seeing the impact that it has in reaching out new audiences.
That's incredible. Congratulations on a room full of new friends this week. I hope that goes very well for you. Sophie, Shannon touched, or pardon me, see, I knew I was going to do it. Sophie touched on some of the more traditional ways we continue to engage people in international development and the work, and some exciting new ways, but you have a lot of experience and exposure to youth. How do you feel that their role is evolving in championing global action, and what critical perspectives should young people bring to the discussion and the work that we're doing around global challenges?
Yeah, so I've definitely seen a real increase in the popularity of the concept of youth engagement and incorporation of input from young people into programs and services, which is wonderful, of course. I think it's a really wonderful way for young people to get their feet wet in a sector like global development that can be really intimidating if you don't have previous experience. In a room like this, and I'm sure with people joining online, we know that there's so many backgrounds that come together in this sector and collaborate. But again, for young people, it's hard to know that until you've had that exposure. So it's really wonderful to see that increase in opportunities for young people to be part of committees, of advisory boards, consultations, working groups. And I think a really important perspective for young people is just that, is that there are so many backgrounds that add value to this space, and even just the lived experience of being a young person growing up in this very rapidly changing world can add so much value to a room, where no one else has that experience.
Very well said, thank you. One of the things that Bibinur mentioned was the International Youth Fellowship and her role in supporting that. In her organization, Accelerate Prosperity. And here at Aga Khan Foundation Canada, we're proud to have partnered with Global Affairs Canada for over 30 years. I believe we've just passed 35, to deliver our International Youth Fellowship program. It's a place where many Canadians in the sector started their careers. Maybe some of you are here tonight. Oh, raise of hands. I know there are some of you, but that's okay. Oh, there we go. The program places early career professionals with our partner organizations overseas, and it has a dual objective of creating opportunities for young Canadians to meaningfully contribute to development activities overseas, but while also contributing to their own growth and skills and learning. And before I ask Bibinur a question related to the fellowship, we would like to share a video showing a glimpse of that program in practice. If you wouldn't mind turning your attentions to the screen, we'll see you in a moment, Bibinur.
I think it's really important to connect to community because you're not only coming to support or help, but you're coming to bear witness.
For a long time, I think development has operated in a way where it was about what Western ideas could come in and have an impact on communities. To be able to take an approach that's more community focused feels more meaningful because I'm able to uplift the voices of those around me.
It's just coming into it with a level of curiosity, understanding that you're learning just as much, if not more, from the communities that you serve.
People who have a way better appreciation about what can be done to address the issues that are happening in their community. This has been a great opportunity to see positive development in practice.
So Bibinur, as someone who is directly connected with fellows on a regular basis, can you provide some insights for all of us on how that fellowship program has contributed to accelerate prosperity, and in turn, how those initiatives that you are working on every day there have made a meaningful impact on local and global communities?
I just wanted to give a little bit background information is that, as I have told, I joined Accelerate Prosperity in 2019. And when I joined, I was, I was appointed as a supervisor to one of the fellows. And that was a really scary, like being honest, I was very scared to have a fellow because I always thought that I'm not ready, I'm not good enough to be a supervisor, especially for the international fellow. And I think every time I would assign something or I would talk about something, I would make so much preparations because I was thinking that those people are different, that I'm going to be wrong, or I need to be like perfect when I talk. But you won't know my surprise that, I right now I can totally say it that for me it's much easier to work with an international fellows with rather than anyone else. I love my experience having with each of the international fellows I had. And I think like it was a direct supervision. I think I had 4 fellows, and I'm really excited to share with all of you guys that each of them have been onboarded to the very good organizations, and they're taking their own career paths after our experience with Accelerate Prosperity. And if we go into their actual contribution, I think one of the very important things that we do not speak a lot is that we gain a lot of confidence working with international fellows, because a lot of times we do question also ourselves. Are we doing a right thing? Are we on the right track? It's type of a things when you are you act very local. You think that this is the only context where like this experience or this knowledge can work, but you end up having an international fellow who actually assures that this is how the world actually acts, and you become a confident yourself, confident in your initiatives, that we are on the right track. And also when the international fellows, they enrich this idea with their own new knowledges and like different experience they have gained back in Canada. I think that's something that really is contributing a lot to what we do. I think there are some bigger things, maybe bigger pillars, which are cross-cultural experience. I think something that which are by default, but I think confidence and building our confidence is the first thing that I would really outline. And also, I think one of the things that I would really emphasize that there is a huge knowledge transfer. I cannot even explain how huge it is, because one thing when you are actually learning online or learning by trainings, learning, I don't know, on open sources, but another thing when you actually get a person who can explain you fully the thematics or topic, and this knowledge is transferred to our local context, and we actually try apply all of this knowledge into our context. I think that's something that drives the innovation, that's something that is contributing to our high quality delivery. And that's something which is, I think, is a legacy from the international fellows, because they are leaving for us something to use in the future. And I think from my experience and overall experience of our organization is that every fellow that we have, or we had in the past. I think they definitely left their legacy. And I think that's what's really important, is that they're coming to our country, to the developing world, and they're actually contributing to changing it into better.
Thank you so much, Vibinur. And I want to make sure we emphasize how much those fellows' lives are changed by learning from you and working with you and being able to have that experience. So it is very much a partnership, and we're so glad you continue to be a partner for us.
Thank you.
Shannon, and I do mean Shannon, Vibinur is speaking a lot about the incredibly impactful and meaningful ways that young people can engage in international development. As you mentioned, youth engagement is becoming increasingly popular. Sometimes that zeitgeist or that enthusiasm can create a point where it becomes, there's a risk of it becoming tokenistic. Can you speak to organizations and best practices for engaging young people in a meaningful way?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think definitely a consequence of so many organizations being interested in engaging young people means that there's sometimes a bit of a flurry of activity to engage young people without necessarily pausing to make sure that it's done in a good and a meaningful way. So a couple of things that I've found to be really important. One is flexibility. So recognizing that it might not be appropriate to work with young people in the same way that an organization works with their own paid staff or their board of directors. And Sophie, touched on this as well in terms of even a panel discussion might not be the way to attract young people. It might be necessary to go outside of that and be a little bit more creative. Opening up times that you communicate with young people that you're engaging, or ways that they can engage and participate that might be different than meetings or Zoom calls, or the types of opportunities that are very traditional. I think feedback mechanisms are really, really important, especially for organizations that are new to engaging with youth. So making sure that there are multiple channels for participants to provide that feedback and input, some that are anonymous, and recognize the power structures that might make it uncomfortable for young people to provide that criticism. And then lastly, recognizing that the input of one young person is, of course, not representative of all young people. Young people are individuals, they have unique perspectives, and of course it's wonderful to bring on one or two or three representatives who might bring that youth perspective, but also recognizing that it's important to have multiple channels and keep in mind that one person can't possibly represent the views of an entire community or population.
Thank you, an astute reminder. Sophie, you're no stranger to engaging young people at WUSC. With 10,000 Canadians having engaged in volunteer opportunities overseas, can you tell the group a little bit about the goals and the impact of the program and what those indicators of success are?
Which specifically the overseas volunteer program?
Yes.
Or the volunteering in Canada that we have? Because these are two separate things.
Whichever one you'd like to speak to.
I can speak to both, but it's going to take a little bit more time.
Let's pick one then, given our pressures of time here.
But they are related. But I think just to piggyback on what Shannon has said is about engaging youth is there are different ways, and one way that we found is to have something concrete. And you'll see where I'm going with that. But something concrete is having something hands-on that they can do. So volunteering globally is one thing, but also through the student refugee program that WUSC has, where we have over 1,200 students on CEGEPs, colleges, and university campuses every year who welcome refugee students. And so we've seen that in terms of impact and in terms of number of engagement, when they have something concrete, something they can relate to. So they're gathering information, they're attending panels, they're getting motivated, they're doing activities on their respective campuses, they're engaging Canadians while they're abroad. But when they have something tangible to share, it's really where this number comes from. And I think that if you ask any of our youth ambassadors or any of our returned international volunteer, it's getting that impression that they're actually doing something that they can relate to the human connections that they're building, that they are connecting with partners locally, that they are connecting with the sponsor students, former refugees that we welcome if we're talking about in Canada engagement. And so I think this is really where the success of the different program lies. And I will stop there because you don't want me to go over for too long, because I can speak about that for the entire evening.
Well, we do love passion. We're encouraging passion in the sector, so I
It's a
appreciate
bliss
that.
of what we do.
Bibinur, as someone who is based outside of Canada, what do you see as the most valuable ways that Canadians and other countries in the global north can contribute to the better quality of life in regions like Central Asia, where you are?
I think very obvious one is like continuing this the fellowships that we are having right now. I think this is one of the maybe hands-on things that can contribute, and also the knowledge transfer. And I think I have touched up on this a lot. And I think in the context of the overall the challenges and the climate change, which is like really touching Central Asia and South Asia at this moment, I think knowledge transfer and doing something on this regards, I think would really make a lot of sense, because considering the economic context where we are at now, those are the sectors which need maybe a lot of capacity building in this sense.
Thank you. I'm going to go back to Shannon, because you started to talk about feedback mechanisms, which really tweaked my interest, and providing unique opportunities for youth that address their needs. Can you share us a little, could you share for us maybe some ideas about how we can support youth to be actively engaged in these issues? What kind of support are they looking for from the organizations who want to engage them?
Yeah, so one that I always like to mention is compensation when it's possible. I know in a lot of sectors, including this one, budgets can be tight, of course, but even considerations around reimbursements for costs incurred for internet, for young people who might be taking time away from a part-time job to participate in this type of work, and thinking about where it's possible to provide some kind of compensation and reimbursement for that time and that effort is really, really important for starting to break down some of those barriers that prevent a lot of young people from being able to participate. I think fostering safe spaces as much as possible. So when it comes to committees or working groups, you want to have more than just one young person. You want to have a community where it's possible to have, you know, a group or multiple coming together and making sure that spaces are safe for young people to ask questions, and have those learnings without the fear that they're going to say the wrong thing. And then thirdly, I would say fostering, again, this is maybe my personal interest a little bit coming through, but where it's possible to foster those local to global connections and encouraging young people to be curious and to identify those points of connection between the lives that they're living every day and what their lived experience is, and these larger sustainable development goals that we're working toward as a broader sector, can be really powerful in terms of just making the work that much more meaningful and impactful.
Thank you. I really appreciate you touching on safe spaces, and I think that dovetails into the kinds of conversations that youth want to have about the nature of the work we do and how we do that work. Sophia, you know, we're nearing the end, but I'm going to ask you to dig deep, and we'll see how that generates the Q&A after this. But can you share some examples with us of how WUSC has navigated and integrated anti-racist and intersectional feminist principles into your public engagement? And how does that contribute to creating a more equitable international development sector?
That's a very long question. I feel like it could be the discussion of an entire panel.
It could.
So I'll just go briefly over, but happy to continue the conversation after the panel with anyone who has an interest in learning more. But one approach, well, we've been taking multiple approaches, but one of them that I like to focus on tonight is really, I know there's a lot of GAC people in the room, I'm sorry, but focusing not on Canadians, focusing on what the local communities, what the partners we're working with are doing, focusing on really the ground level work and using their insights, their comments, their initiatives to share how we can contribute at a distance. And so a few examples, well, the art exhibit is one thing that we've done, where we really just reached out to artists in Malawi and Ghana and asked them, you know, there are SDGs. What would you want us to know about the reality in your communities? What is the message that you, as a Malawian, as a Ghanaian, want to send to people in Canada who will view the exhibit? So that's one aspect of the change that we've started implementing. It's far from being done, but also reaching out to the partners. And so we've often, through our volunteer cooperation program, focused on the role that Canadians can play in supporting local communities. For the event that we're hosting and the recent content that we've put together, there is no mention of the involvement of Canadians in what the partners are doing. It's really what's their initiative, what they think is good for their community. And sometimes they mention the support that Canadians have provided in making this happen, but it's really about the need that they see in their community and them telling us what we should be sharing as a message to Canadians. So obviously it's a different approach. Not everyone, like, we're not reaching the same audience. We're reaching people who are already aware of global development issues. But we've been trying this approach and trying to be more inclusive and really putting the light on the issues and the amazing work that people are already doing over there, so that people can understand how they can actually contribute. So trying to move away from the volunteerism aspect of, you know, I'm a Canadian, I'm gonna go build a school, instead of, okay, these are like the partners, they've established their needs. They've established where they wanna go, they know their community, they know their plan. How can you, as a Canadian, bring your skills to contribute to what they're actually trying to achieve? So that's the message that we're trying to convey through our public engagement activities from now on.
That's fantastic. I'm sure you and Bibinor can have a great chat afterwards about all the local needs that you could help her address. Now's the time to hear from you in the audience. If you've joined us physically here at the delegation, please make your way to a microphone so that everyone could hear your question. And if you're online, my illustrious colleague Uju will be reading your question out to the room. So please don't be shy. We're here to engage in dialogue, and we'd love to hear your hard-hitting questions. I mean, your gentle, encouraging questions for our panel this evening. Uju, is there anything online you wanted to get us started with? No? Shy room. I have more questions here, but if you have burning questions, we do want to address them. Okay. I'm going to come back to you, Shannon, and I'm going to ask about ethical considerations for individuals. You touched a lot on the way youth are approaching things and the lens they're bringing to it. What do you think is a lens for Canadians to use ethically when looking at the goals of poverty reduction, and that your actions have a positive and sustainable impact? Have you seen any evidence from our youth about the way they're looking at those issues and through lenses?
Could you say that one more time?
I certainly can. Ethical considerations for Canadians seeking to contribute to poverty reduction, and what you might do to ensure that your actions have a positive and sustainable impact.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think a big part of that is coming into these discussions. Again, for young people, often engagement activities with organizations may be their first exposure to international development, to starting to recognize some of the power structures that are at play in this type of work, and they may not always be aware of the potential harms. So I think it is about coming into these spaces with curiosity, with an open mind, with a view to learning, and, you know, balancing that with, like I said, bringing the experience and expertise that you do have as a young person without undervaluing that. So it can be tough to balance those two things at once, but I think that's can be really helpful in my experience.
Thank you. Wanting to maybe, Vibinur, get your take on having engaged with so many Canadians in a very direct and meaningful way. What advice would you have for Canadians who are eager to make a meaningful impact on global development?
I will just talk from my experience, and it can be different for others as well. I think I just had one experience, and I think one of the first things that I would really maybe advise and propose before joining the countries like developing in a developing context is like really have a conversation with yourself and really think about your passion and where it lays. I think that's going to shape a lot of things and the experience of a young person and a young professional, because it's not only us receiving something from the international fellow, but it's also for the international fellow to gain as much as possible from the whole experience and learnings. I think that's something that I would really emphasize on. And I think I have also like really resonates what Shannon already brought, like really being curious and open-minded and try to contribute what already exists. And I think Sophie has touched already upon this, and not trying to building something from the scratch or something new, but like mostly supporting. I think that's what builds a lot of confidence and the bridge between that organization and the fellowship itself.
Thank you. Sophie, same question, but from your perspective, advice for Canadians who are eager to make a meaningful impact on global development.
I think my advice, obviously, similar
Well,
answer,
yes,
but
and.
I'll go in a different direction. But I do agree with what my two colleagues have said. But one thing that I really like to tell people is take it where you're at. So I like the example of giving like a single mother student, full-time in school, 3 children at home, who is really passionate and wants to get engaged. Is asking her to make a donation the right fit for her at this time where she's at in her life right now? Probably not. But can she volunteer 1 or 2 hours per week? Is there something that she can do based on where she's at in her life right now, whether it's just learning, attending a conference, or having a one-on-one conversation? So one example that I like to often share with people is at university, learning about fair trade. Do you have necessarily the budget to purchase the fair trade? Is usually slightly more expensive than the regular bananas at the grocery store. Can you afford as a student to buy and to pay the fair trade premium on the bananas? Not necessarily. Does that mean that you do not support global development? Absolutely not. So just at this level where you're at right now, having a conversation about fair trade, learning about what it means, and then once you've graduated, once you've got a more stable job, once you can afford to pay that extra 30, 60 cents on the bananas, then you can decide to make this decision and to change your consumption habit. And so that's really something that I try to keep in how I approach public engagement and the work that I do, is always having various levels of engagement and allowing people to really feel comfortable to engage at the level that they're at right now in their personal or professional life.
Thank you. Okay, Shannon, you get to say anything that hasn't been said yet about advice for Canadians who are eager to make a meaningful impact on global development.
Yeah, I think this is similar to what Sophie has said, but I think it's about finding a way to contribute that's both meaningful and manageable. So that the result can be at very different scales. It could be having those conversations. It could be listening to a podcast, such as Care Canada's She Soars podcast.
Nicely done.
It could be calling your local representative, writing a letter to the editor of your local newspaper. It could be volunteering. It could be making a donation. And that's going to be different for everybody. But it's the collective impact of those small efforts that really, over time, leads to change and progress towards our goals.
Thank you. I'm going to spare you from this question, Bibinur, given the Canadian context. I don't feel you should have to communicate on domestic issues in this regard, but we started to touch on some meaningful considerations in the sector and the way we view things. So to each of you, and I'll let you go first this time, Shannon, what advice do you have for Canadians who are conflicted on how to make a meaningful impact on global development?
Yeah, I mean, I have heard this, and I think it tends to be well-intentioned. It's often in the context of, we have so many issues here in the Canadian context that are also deserving of attention and resources. And I think my response to that is that, solutions to these global challenges and Canadian challenges are not necessarily in conflict with one another. So, even in terms of how budgeting works, resources come from different pools. There are different people making decisions about how resources should be allocated. So you don't have to choose one or the other. I think really, if we're advocating for all levels of government to make decisions that prioritize human rights, you really can't go wrong.
Thank you. Your thoughts, Sophie, on Canadians who are conflicted about
Exactly
making
what she said.
Okay.
But no, I think it's providing the space and getting people to understand that all of the issues are important. It's not because you're focusing on reducing homelessness in Ottawa that it's going against something else in the world. So it's really bringing people to the understanding that the importance is to be engaged, is to find what you're really passionate about, and just stay aware. So just learning about a situation is being engaged. It's part of the first stage of the continuum that we usually work with in the public engagement sector. And so it's not because you're not like donating or volunteering 12 months overseas that you're not engaged and that you prefer to support local initiatives. So it's really, all of these are complementary. The SDGs need to be applied in Canada as well as everywhere in the world. Like there is no one country, there's not one country around the world who can say, we have a perfect score for all of the 17 SDGs. And so it's the combination of where everyone works on that can make us fully achieve the world that we want to live in. So instead of seeing them as conflict, see them more as complementary, exactly as you said.
That is a lovely turn of phrase to end on. I'd like to thank Bibinur for joining us from Tajikistan. I'd like to thank Sophie and Shannon for joining us here in Ottawa. Thank you very much to our panelists. You have been released from your chairs. Thank you.
Thank you.
In conclusion, as we're here this evening to celebrate International Development Week and going for the goals, it's my pleasure to soon welcome someone I have the pleasure of working with, who is one of our dear partners at Global Affairs Canada, and someone with both a personal and professional passion for International Development Week. As the Director of Global Citizens and Engagement Division, Susan Perez-Veroff is the perfect guest to share with us Global Affairs Canada's commitment to public engagement and reflect on its role in the sector during this important week for us. Susan has spent her career in international development on strategic policy, bilateral programs in Africa and the Americas, as well as programs to foster partnerships on climate change and with Indigenous peoples. She has been posted to Canadian missions in Mozambique, Senegal, and Brazil, and has lived, studied, and volunteered in the United States, the United Kingdom, and Indonesia. She has a Master of Arts in Political Science with a major in Environmental Studies, for those of you who want to pursue that, want to speak with her later, from the University of Toronto, and a Bachelor of Arts in International Relations from the University of British Columbia. She was born in Prince Albert, Saskatchewan, and currently lives in Ottawa, Ontario. You are a global citizen and a national citizen, Susan. She currently lives here with her two lively children. Please welcome to the stage, Susan Perez-Veroff.
Well, thank you, Kirsten. It really is a deep pleasure for me to be here today to participate in my second IDW event of the day. And I just wanted to wish you all a very happy International Development Week, une joyeuse semaine de développement international. This is the week that we build up towards to try to celebrate the contributions of Canadians in all their forms to international development and to reducing poverty and creating a more inclusive, prosperous, and peaceful world. But it's also a moment where we seek to inform ourselves better, open ourselves to the inspiration from stories that we can hear from others, and find ways to become more involved. And there isn't one way to be involved. There isn't one single way to engage, or to engage Canadians. There isn't a single pathway for those opportunities. It's a multiplicity of pathways. And I think, as I was listening to Sophie and Shannon and to Bibinur, I was thinking we're speaking on variations of a theme, right? There are many, we're moving in the same direction with the same goals, but in slightly different ways that can create a beautiful sort of music and harmony with one another. And that's what we see a lot during International Development Week is the conversations that happen across the country, in small communities, in large cities, literally from coast to coast to coast. We're at over 100 events, I think, on our calendar, and we know that we're only just capturing a fraction of what's happening. So thank you for hosting this event tonight. Thank you for having me here today. It is really a pleasure also to underline the commitment of Global Affairs Canada to promoting global citizenship, to promoting opportunities to learn, opportunities to engage and contribute around the world. Because we know that the global is local and local is global. The challenges that we face around the world are bigger than what any individual nation, any individual community can solve. It takes all of us. And Canadians, as citizens in all countries, have a diversity of perspectives, a diversity of expertise and capacities that can be brought to bear to addressing the global challenges and the Sustainable Development Goals. So Global Affairs Canada has an entire set of programming that I have the pleasure of working on every day to help mobilize people, to provide them the opportunities to engage. And I've left a pamphlet over at the Aga Khan Foundation of Canada's table over there, where people can get a little bit more information about that. We spoke today a lot, we heard a lot about youth and the important role they have in shaping the global future, and the role that they can, the important voice they can bring to international development conversations. And I actually started, in fact, in Indonesia. That I was there as an intern, and that was one of the most transformational, opportunities I could have had. And that internship program, many years later, continues to exist. And there was a call for proposals recently, and the next iteration hopefully will get up and running very, very shortly here. Youth do deserve their own approach, like their own opportunities. Volunteer Cooperation Program, WUSC, is one of the partners, and others, 15 organizations, in fact, in Canada are implementing that program. The Canadian experts and professionals want to share their experience oftentimes, and so providing pathways for that through the Technical Assistance Partnership is another important program. But those are dedicated programs that offer Canadians opportunities. But a theme, and I'll speak to the variation on that theme right now, is this is not driven by Canada and what Canada wants. It's driven by and is meant to be in response to supporting locally driven, locally conceived and locally owned approaches on things. And if there's any doubt out there somehow that Global Affairs Canada doesn't believe that, I hope I can help dispel that, because this is, the local ownership is one of the core principles for effective development assistance. And there's a lot of conversation about shifting power, about decolonizing, development, but especially about focusing on locally led approaches. And that carries over to our public engagement. And I was very happy to hear Sophie talk about the shifting narratives and the shifting approaches to telling stories. Global Affairs Canada does depend on and working in partnership with civil society organizations in Canada to help tell the stories. But it's because there's power in being able to tell stories from lived experience. But that lived experience comes first and foremost from the communities and organizations in the countries that we work with. And so I think it's refreshing. We can talk about that openly. That is something that is powerful in terms of telling stories. And another parallel event that's happening today, in fact, is a project hosted by the Anti-Racism Cooperation Hub, a program that we support also, to help organizations in Canada think through, the systemic racism and power dynamics maybe within their organization and that manifest in how they design programs, how they communicate, how their internal operations work. So that event today, I think, is also of relevance for all of us to try to catch up afterwards. But I really could speak for this for quite a long time, but we are short on time, and I think it would be nice to get to the small, more intimate conversations that'll come after this. So I will close by thanking you once again, Kirsten and the AKFC, for hosting this event, for inviting me to be here, for marking International Development Week. And we always hope that International Development Week will be celebrated all year long, so I hope we have the opportunity to come together again later in the year. So thank you once again. Thanks.
Thank you, Susan, for giving us those remarks. I stand here as the last person between you and some refreshments, so please bear with me. I want to thank you all for your active participation in today's session. And before we wrap up, as always, we would always love to hear from you. So momentarily on the screen, we're going to see a QR code that's going to come up. And also, if you're joining virtually, please just use the link that will be shared in the chat. Your honest feedback is crucial to us, so we strongly encourage you to share your thoughts even after you stand up and we formally close. We'll leave the link up, so as you're mingling around, just feel free to bring out your phone and share your feedback with us. Another thing that I'd like to note is here at AKFC, we do have another event coming up on February 22nd. So this is more of a mark your calendar / save the date moment. This event is part of our ongoing series on climate change resilience and adaptation. And the focus for this session is going to be for supporting Canadian international governmental organizations and then any other interested practitioner in better understanding the COP28 adaptation-related outcomes. So the conversation will be focused on some of the adaptation initiatives that were discussed during last year's COP discussion. So if that sounds of interest to you, to someone in your network, someone within your organization, please just make sure to stay connected with us online. If you're not already part of our events mailing list, please visit our table as well. Information to stay up to date with the things that we'll be doing will also be shared there. You can speak to me or any other AKFC colleague that you see walking around the room this evening. And the last thing I would like to highlight is the presence of several organizations that are being featured here at our Global Citizen Marketplace. Results Canada, CARE, WUSC, Help Age Canada, IDRF, CPAR, UNHCR and some of the other organizations that are here this evening. We want to make sure that you take some time after this session is over to please walk around, ask any questions, get to learn about the various works that you're doing, get to get contact information and share those information with people like I mentioned before, maybe within your organization or your personal networks who would benefit from those information. So with that, I will say thank you once again and have a wonderful evening.